Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is the Public Assistance Program applicant briefing for federally declared disaster uh, known as DR-4923. My name is Eric Learn. I am the State Public Assistance Officer for Wisconsin. I am with Wisconsin Emergency Management. And we're going to be going over the PA program today. General overview, how to apply, things you need to know going forward, and what you can expect with this program. Couple of important dates up front. We're going to get into all this in more detail, but I want to give you some important dates right up front. The incident period for this disaster event is April 13th through the 23rd. And that is important because any damages or costs that you're going to be claiming under the PA program have to have occurred during this time period or as a result of the storms that occurred during this time period. So the declaration date of this disaster was June 30th. That's important. It starts the clock for a number of things. Racine County was added to the disaster declaration on August 17th, and that will be important in a second. But the declaration date and your addition to the disaster starts the clock for a couple different things, and we'll get into those. But up front, the declaration date was June 30th. Impacted areas are the 10 counties and Oneida Nation. That's important because any damages or costs that you are claiming have to have occurred in one of those impacted areas that was designated as a part of the disaster. Again, a couple more important dates. Again, we're going to get into all this more later. Request for public assistance, RPA. Submission is due to FEMA in grants portal by September 16th. And without that, you cannot participate in the program. Again, we're going to get into how to apply, everything more, but important date up front, September 16th, very important. You need to submit an RPA by that date. Otherwise, you will not be allowed to participate in the program. And then last day to identify costs will be 60 days after your recovery scoping meeting with FEMA. Again, that's going to be different for each one of you, but again, we'll get into that more later. Real brief overview of the process. Disaster event occurred, again, April 13th through the 23rd, disaster event occurred. You guys all did a wonderful job gathering your damage information during the preliminary damage assessment. All that information was funneled up through the county to the state. That was included in the governor's request letter that was sent to the president. The president did declare the disaster on June 30th. That brings us to today, the applicant briefing. Again, we're going to go over the PA program, what you need to know, how to apply, and what you can expect going through the program. RPA submission, again, is due September 16th. After that, FEMA is going to sit down with you, go over all your damages in your recovery scoping meeting, and then they're going to group all your damages together, start formulating projects. Those projects will go through a number of different reviews and approvals, including your own. And once it makes it through that approval review process, it'll get obligated. And then that last little curve in the lower right generally takes the longest. That is when you are completing any work that you need to complete. Once all the work has been completed and you're ready to close out your project, there's some final paperwork to sign, and then everyone's favorite, payment.
Can I chime in quick?
Yes, absolutely.
Is this for the flood of the PD basement?
This is for the storm events that occurred April 13th through the 23rd.
Yes, Justin, that's part of it.
That the flood occurred March 10th.
So that would not be this disaster event.
All right, then I'll be out of the meeting then. Bye.
Sorry to interrupt you here. Bill Miller, DPW, City of Racine. We're here for the March 10th event too. So if that was the damage to the safety building, so we're out of this then?
Correct. Any damages that you are claiming will have to have occurred between April 13th as a result of the storms that occurred April 13th through the 23rd.
Okay, yeah, we didn't have any damage with that storm, so I'll probably bow out then if that's okay.
Yep, that's perfectly fine.
Thank you.
I'm thinking we have some miscommunication here. Yeah, we've all been sent for the major damage we had in the city for the storm in March. Unless I'm missing something, that's all the briefing I got and all the homework we did. So I don't know about this April date either.
Yeah, I can jump in real quick. So when I sent out the emails about this briefing, I specified that it was for any flood damage that should have occurred from April 13th to 23rd. If you had any damages prior to that, that would not be covered in this disaster declaration. So I apologize if there was miscommunication from me to whoever passed it on to you. But yeah, if it wasn't from the April storms, then it wouldn't be eligible for this.
Okay, we just had all that severe damage and stuff from the March flooding, but okay, thank you.
All right. We will continue on. If there are any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll try to address those as they come up. But yep, so who's eligible to apply? State governments, obviously county governments, cities, towns, villages, tribes, tribal organizations, certain private nonprofits, electrical co-ops, institutes of higher education, and school districts, others. Now, to participate in the public assistance program, you'll have to get into FEMA's grants portal system, and starting in March of this year, they now use login.gov to log into their system. This is a federal website login process that FEMA uses for their grants portal program or system. Federal government also uses for sam.gov and other government websites. So whoever is going to be getting into grants portal to interact with FEMA and sign off on things will need a login.gov account. And then once you have that account, you'll be able to sign up and get registered. You can do that through me if you're not already in grants portal, but you'll use your login.gov account to log into grants portal. And this is the website that FEMA uses to manage their grants. And what you'll use to develop the grants, sign, and you can track your projects as they go through the development process and approvals. You'll need to get in here to sign off on it, and I, as the state, also have to sign off on your projects as well. It goes through a number of reviews, but the FEMA grants portal system is what you'll be working in as your projects go through the development and approval process. So you'll use login.gov to get into portal, and once you're in portal, you'll sign off on things and do what you need to do to get your projects obligated. And if you're not already set up in grants portal, an email should have went out with the information that's needed to get your organization set up. And if you need a user account in grants portal, you can also email me the information. I can get users set up in grants portal, and that way when it comes time, there isn't a holdup of getting people signed up and registered. Again, if your organization isn't already in grants portal, this is the information that would be needed. Again, if you need to get set up, let me know and we can get you set up. If you need a UEI number, which is a unique entity ID number, this replaces the previously used DUNS number. So if you've been a part of a disaster before, you might have used a DUNS number. This was discontinued back in 2022. A UEI number is required to receive, it's a federal requirement to receive grant funds. If you don't have one, or if you're not sure, I would ask your finance person. They probably know if you had one and what it would be. But if you need to, you can sign up on sam.gov. And again, you'll need a login.gov account to get into sam.gov, but you get a UEI number by going through sam.gov to get that. But again, DUNS numbers are no longer used. We also don't use cage codes. They are no longer used or required for this program, but this is perfect, 100% free. There are services out there that you offer to register for you and to renew for you for a fee, of course. This service is totally free, not needed to go through one of those unless you want to, but it's fairly simple to get on sam.gov and sign up and renew perfectly free. When your user account is created in grants portal, you'll receive an email similar to this one. It'll have your username, which will be your email address. The email address that you use in grants portal has to match the email associated with your login.gov account. So if you are a previous user of FEMA grants portal and you need to change your email address, let me know. I can change it for you. But if you are a new user and signing up to get access to grants portal, the email that you use for that account has to match the email that you use for login.gov account. If they don't match, it won't allow you into the system. You'll get an error message. But after your account is set up in grants portal, you'll receive an email similar to this. Again, your username, which is your email address, and then a password, a random letters and numbers. This password is what you'll use to sign things in grants portal. You can change it. I do suggest that people change their grants portal password to the same password that they use for login.gov to keep it simple. That way, when you're logging in with login.gov, that username and password, after you're in grants portal and you have to sign things, the password's the same. It's up to you. You can keep this randomized password. You can change it to the one you use for login.gov or something completely different. But there are two different passwords. Some people get confused when they are in grants portal and trying to sign something. They'll use their login.gov password, which may or may not be the same as their portal password, depending on if they've changed it or not. But this is an auto-generated email, and so sometimes it may go to the junk or spam folder, but you'll get something similar to this when your user account is created in grants portal. Once you have your login.gov account, and once you're set up in grants portal and you log into grants portal, at the top, there's going to be a yellow bar with a blue text link to submit your request for public assistance. You want to click on that, and it's going to take you through a number of different screens, about 5-6 different screens. It's going to ask you some very high-level questions. There's no paperwork to submit. There's nothing to submit at this time. It is just your application to FEMA, letting them know that you want to participate in the program. It asks you some very high-level questions about the types of damages you had, if your total costs were over or under $1 million, things like that. Again, no documentation to submit at this point. This is just raising your hand, letting FEMA know that, hey, you want to participate in the program. They're going to take this and they're going to assign it to one of their staff members, and the process continues from there. But this is what needs to be submitted by September 16th. Again, without this, they don't know that you want to participate. Very important. If you need help submitting this, let me know. Give me a call, send me an email. I'm more than happy to walk you through it. And if there are any issues, we can get that submitted for you. But again, if you're not sure, submit an application. It is far, far easier to withdraw that application after the fact. But if you don't have one submitted by September 16th, you will not be able to participate in the PA program for this disaster event. So I can't stress this enough. You need to get that RPA submitted by September 16th. If there's any questions, issues, signing up for grants portal, filling out the RPA, getting it submitted, please let me know. I will help you. I'll get you set up, answer your questions, get the RPA submitted for you if needed. But I can't stress it enough. Submit that by September 16th. Another website you'll use, so login.gov account, FEMA grants portal system. After your project goes through the development, review, and approval process, and it gets obligated, it gets put into the state's system, so WEM's EM Grants Pro system. So FEMA's grants portal system is all pre-award, and the state's EM Grants Pro system is all post-award. So Grants Pro is WEM's grants management system, and in here you're going to do all your post-award activities. And you're going to be submitting time extensions if needed, scope of work changes, quarterly reports. If you'll be signing some documentation, and once it comes time to close out your project, you're going to be submitting that documentation in here and signing other documentation, but everything post-award is going to be done in EM Grants Pro. You do not have to sign up for this. Accounts and everything is created automatically for you. So what I do is after you submit that RPA to FEMA in their grants portal system, I take that information, I upload it into our system, and that automatically creates accounts for you. So if you previously or already have a user account in here, you might have already had one if you've participated in the Wisconsin Disaster Fund program. If you've been in here before, you already have an account. If you forgot your password, there is a forgot password function, or if you need to, you can always call or email me as well. I can get in there, add users, reset passwords, things of that nature. But so FEMA Grants Portal system, all pre-award. WEM's Grants Pro system is all post-award. So those are the two systems you're going to be in the most throughout this whole process, but different systems, different uses. After that RPA is submitted and I upload all your stuff into our system, the system will send out, you'll need to submit assurances, and this is an agreement that basically you're going to be using all the funds that you receive through the public assistance program. You're going to follow all the necessary rules, laws, and regulations. You're not going to loan it out to your friend to buy a car or anything like that. It's just a document stating that you're going to use the funds appropriately and what they're meant for. This is required, assigned assurances is required before any payments are made. but what an authorized representative from your organization will need to sign this before any payments can be made. But that again is done in the WEMS EM Grants Pro system. You read through it, it's a couple pages, and then there's a little box at the bottom to certify and sign it, and then you can submit that document. But new this year, new this time around is a payment authorization. So when you're signing assurances, there's gonna be a little drop-down box. It's gonna ask you if you want a physical check or if you want electronic payment. Either is fine. Before, all we were able to do is physical checks. Now we have the option to do electronic payments. I'm more than happy to send you a check if that's your preference, but we do offer that electronic payments can now be made. Totally up to you. You're not locked in, but it just asks for your preference right away up front when you're filling out those assurances. If you change your mind later, not a problem. We can change it before any payments are made. But so after you submit your RPA, FEMA is going to assign you a program delivery manager. This is your main FEMA point of contact. They are going to get in contact with you and set up a recovery scoping meeting. They're going to come, they're going to sit down with you, and they're going to go over all your costs, all your damages. And this is the point in time where you want to bring everything that you have related to the disaster event with you. So all the costs you've incurred, all the damages that you sustained, all that documentation, bring it with you to your recovery scoping meeting, and you'll go through it with your FEMA point of contact. So any work that you've completed and actual costs, and then also any damages that you haven't yet been able to repair. Also, if you have any mitigation ideas, and we'll get into mitigation in a little bit, but any mitigation ideas you want to do on any damaged facility, for instance, culverts is a big one in Wisconsin. If you want to upsize the culvert or add riprap, things of that nature, bring those ideas with you to your recovery scoping meeting, and they can take that into account as your projects start being developed. Also, if you had any volunteer labor or other donated resources, bring that documentation with you as well. They can potentially write that into a project as well, and that helps offset your cost share. Important with this recovery scoping meeting, whenever this occurs, and it's going to be different for each and one of you, when you sit down with FEMA for your recovery scoping meeting, that starts the clock for you. You have 60 days from that meeting to identify all damages and costs that you incurred due to the disaster event. So again, that's going to be different for each one of you, but that starts the clock to get any damages that you sustained or costs that you incurred included in your claim. FEMA is going to ask you to fill out an impact list of your damages and costs. This is a real brief kind of overview of what you sustained. There's going to be a category of work column. Don't worry about that if you're not sure. The name of the damages, for instance, debris removal, a very, very brief description. The cause, whether that was flooding, was wind, tornado, whatever the case may be, hail, the cause, and then location, whether that's an address, GPS coordinates, whatever the case may be, just a general location. But FEMA will use this to start grouping your damages and costs together to start formulating your projects. So what's eligible? So damages must be disaster related. Again, any damages or costs that you are claiming have to have occurred as a result of the storms that occurred between April 13th and 23rd. If it is before that or due to another event after that, those damages and costs would not be eligible under this event. So again, has to be disaster related. The facility has to be your legal responsibility. So for instance, if you are renting space in a building, and that building was taken out by a flood, you can't claim the building damage. The building damage is the responsibility of the building owner. You as a renter would not be responsible for repairing that building. So any costs, any damages that you're claiming have to be your legal responsibility to repair, maintain that facility. The facility has to have been in active use at the time of the disaster. So if a building is being built and it's 95% complete and a tornado comes through and takes that building out, that would not be eligible for assistance under the PA program because the building was not complete. It was not in active use at the time of the event. If you had a road that was closed because the bridge was out and flood came through and washed out the road and took out the bridge, that would not be eligible because the road was not open and in active use at the time of the disaster. So whatever facility, whatever costs you, damages you're claiming have to have been in active use at the time of the disaster event. Has to be located in the designated disaster area. So one of those 10 counties or the tribal nation. If everything's within Racine County borders, you're good to go. Can't be covered by insurance. So if you had a facility and it sustained damages and insurance is going to cover the cost of those repairs, you cannot also claim that same costs under the program. PA program, it's considered double dipping. If insurance is covering it, you cannot also get other assistance for those same costs. So if you have an underinsured building facility, not necessarily building, but a facility, if it's underinsured or uninsured, those costs could potentially be eligible for reimbursement. So again, bring up your damages with your FEMA point of contact and they can help you determine what's eligible and what's not. Now, if insurance is covering all your damages or not, if you have a deductible, that could also potentially be eligible for reimbursement, depending on your costs and damages. If the deductible meets the minimum project threshold, in this case, it's $4,100. We'll get into that later. But if you have an insurance deductible, again, bring that up, could also be eligible for reimbursement. And of course, any damages or costs that you're claiming can't also be funded by another federal agency. Federal programs don't always like to play nice together, but if you're already receiving federal money, you can't also receive additional federal money through the PA program for the same facility. And of course, you have to comply with all the federal, state, local laws, rules, and regulations. Types of work. So FEMA's going to take your damages and they're going to categorize them into one of these areas. Two main groupings, first being emergency work. This is categories A and B. Category A, debris clearance. Self-explanatory, you're clearing off debris that was sustained from the flooding or wind, tornado, wherever the case may be, whether that be vegetative or building debris. Clearing that off, making the area safe again. Emergency protective measures, this is things such as blocking off roads, putting up sandbags, things of that nature. Categories A and B are considered emergency work. This comes into play with timelines, which we'll get into next. If it's not emergency work, it's considered permanent work. This is all your repairs to things like roads, buildings, utilities, parks, things like that. Any permanent work that you're doing to restore a facility back to its pre-disaster state is considered permanent work. Period of performance. So emergency work, again, categories A and B, debris clearance and emergency protective measures. You get an initial 6 months to complete that work, and that starts at the declaration date. So that's June 30th. So you get an initial 6 months to complete that work. If you need additional time, you can request a time extension. And I at this state have the authority to give you an additional 6 months to complete that work. So a year in total from June 30th. If you need additional time beyond that, then we have to submit a time extension to FEMA, and it goes to them for their review. So that's for emergency work, debris clearance, and emergency protective measures. If it's permanent work, you get an initial 18 months, so a year and a half from June 30th to complete that work. And if you need more time with that, you can request a time extension from me. I can approve an additional 30 months. Again, if you need additional time beyond that, then again, we have to submit a time extension to FEMA, and I can help you with that. And it goes to them for their review, hopefully approval. But communicate with me if there's any delays or problems that you're experiencing. We generally like to see time extensions submitted at least a month ahead of time. But if you know, you can tell by maybe the weather, construction season, whatever the case may be, the sooner the better. And that helps to get that in and approved. But as soon as you know, let me know, and we can get that time extension submitted. We want to make sure that all the work that you're doing, all the costs that you're incurring to recover from this event, it remains eligible, and that you can get reimbursed for it. So we want to make sure that it stays within an approved period of performance. So only costs that are eligible are those that are documented. Keep good documentation. Who did the work, where the work was being done, how much it cost, what you were using, all that fun stuff. Document your costs, document the work that you're doing. Now, FEMA will write your damages up into different projects, and there'll be project numbers. As you are documenting your repair costs, keep your costs separated by project. So you might, for instance, have 5 roads in your town that each get their own project. As you're repairing those roads, keep track of the costs by project. So each road. In reality, all your roads will probably be on one project, but just for discussion's sake, you have 5 roads. Keep track of the equipment, the labor, and any materials that you're using to repair that road. That way, when it comes time for closeout, those costs are already separated. You're not trying to go back and look to see what costs, what documentation goes to what road. It'll be already done at that time. If you're using contractors, have them keep track of their costs by location as well. If you tell them up front, they're generally usually pretty good about doing this. But if you try to do it in the end and make them go back, they generally can do it. It just takes more time. And contractors, any contractors you use need to split out their costs. We will not accept a lump sum. If you have a contractor invoice for $50,000 and it says road repair, I'm going to ask you what roads and how did they come up with that $50,000. But have them break out their costs by location and then how they came up with those costs. Contracts and procurement. I am not a contract specialist or procurement specialist, but general guidelines to work with. If you are procuring a service or buying materials, if it's $5,000 or less, that's considered a micro purchase, and that is just your best reasonable judgment. So $5,000 or less, your reasonable judgment. If it's between $5,000 and $50,000, it's considered a small purchase. State generally likes to see that you get a minimum of 3 estimates, whether this is a phone call, whether you send the company an email, or if they have their prices listed on the internet and you screen capture that. Generally, 3 estimates, but the only one that needs to be in writing is the one that you ultimately go with. But just document that, hey, I called this company for, if you're buying gravel, they wanted X amount of money for the gravel that we need, or email is probably the easiest. That way it's already documented. But $50,000 and up, that's going to be your formal procurement process. Work with your finance person, whoever handles your normal contracting. They'll know how to do a formal procurement and for any professional services, or if you, for instance, doing construction using sealed bidding, all that good stuff. But if you, these are state thresholds, the federal thresholds are much, much higher, but we have to use the most restrictive. So the state thresholds are these ones here. If you have local procurement standards that you need to follow the most restrictive, whether it be your local ones, the state ones, or federal, if they are more restrictive. Again, all your procurement, all your contracts have to follow, must comply with all the federal, state, local standards, and has to be reasonable cost. Now, just because Bob down the street heard that FEMA's coming to town, he can't charge you 3 times what he normally would charge you. That's not reasonable. He has to charge you what he normally does during a regular, any other time of the year. But no debar contractors either. But again, follow the most restrictive guidelines and should be okay. So the PA program does allow for mitigation. This is, you might refer to as 406 mitigation. So this is any mitigation that applies to a damaged element. So if you had a damaged element in the disaster, again, whether it be a road, a building, a bridge, whatever the case may be, if you want to put it back bigger and better to hopefully sustain less or no damage in the future, if you want to include mitigation, the PA program does allow for that. Any mitigation that is included must be determined to be cost effective, and this is done through one of 3 ways. First being the 15% rule. So if the mitigation that you want to do is 15% or less of the overall project cost, that's generally determined to be cost effective. So if you had a $100,000 project, you sustain $100,000 in damages, and you can receive an additional $15,000 in mitigation for that damaged facility. And that will be determined to be cost effective. Next one is the 100% rule. There are some measures that are funded at 100%. FEMA has an entire appendix in their policy guide that is full of mitigation measures that have been determined to be cost effective and are funded at 100%. So again, if you have a facility that sustained $100,000 in damages, you could potentially receive an additional $100,000 in mitigation measures for a total project cost of $200,000. So work with your FEMA person. They love including mitigation in their projects, and they will help you to incorporate as much mitigation as possible to hopefully build back your facilities bigger and better so they don't receive any damages in the future, or if they do, the damages are much less. If the mitigation that you want to do does not meet the 15% rule or the 100% rule, we can do a benefit cost analysis. This does require a little bit more work. There's historical data that is needed, there's previous damage costs, things of that nature, that all gets plugged into a formula and spits out a number. And then mitigation can be determined if it's cost effective or not. But generally, most of the mitigation falls into the 15 or the 100% rule. Now, if you had a building that was damaged and you have to repair that building and build it back, but you of course have to follow all current codes and standards for buildings when you're repairing or building a building or any other facility. If there are codes and standards that you have to meet that are more than what the building was previously, following those codes and standards is not mitigation. That should be a part of the regular project when that project's being written on how to repair and restore that facility back to pre-disaster condition. So just a very, very small sampling of some mitigation ideas that are funded at 100%. Again, FEMA has an entire appendix in their policy guide that's full of mitigation ideas that have already been predetermined to be cost effective and are funded at 100%. Again, very popular in Wisconsin is culverts, upsizing, adding riprap, wing walls, things of that nature. But there's all kinds of them. Again, ask your FEMA point of contact when you sit down with them and start developing your projects if there's mitigation that can be included in your projects if you don't have ideas of your own. Question in the chat is, if the damage took place outside of April 13th to the 23rd window, road failure a week later, for example, would those damages still be grant eligible? So the damages don't have to take place during that time period. They have to be a result of the storms that occurred during that time period. So if the storms came through April 13th to the 23rd, and because of those storms, whether it be flooding or whatever the case may be, your road failed, it sustained damage and failed because of the disaster event that occurred a week earlier, that damages should be eligible. Hopefully that answers your question, Mike. So as your projects are being developed, again, they're going to be going through the process in FEMA's grants portal system. At some point, you're going to be asked to review those projects and sign off on them, approve that project before it moves forward. Do not sign, click, authorize, or otherwise approve anything you don't agree with. It is a lot easier to fix things at the beginning than 2 years down the line when we're trying to close things out and they're not right. So make sure you read your projects, make sure that there's going to be a damage description, make sure that damage description is accurately capturing the damages that you sustained. There's going to be a scope of work. The scope of work is going to lay out how those damages are going to be repaired. It's going to have materials, amounts, costs associated with everything. Make sure that that is accurately being written down and that you agree with those damages and costs. If you do not agree with it, do not approve it. Work with your FEMA point of contact to make sure that the project accurately reflects your damages and the costs that it's going to take to repair that. If there are any problems, questions, issues, feel free to contact me. I'm going to be your point of contact with the state throughout this entire process. So at any point, if there's any problems, questions, issues, anything that you need assistance with, do not hesitate to reach out. But again, before you approve your projects, before you sign off on them, make sure that everything is accurately being captured. Again, that scope of work is going to lay out how you are going to repair your damages. Now, if you're going to go outside of that scope of work, let me know, ideally prior to starting work. In order to remain eligible, we may have to get things approved by FEMA, especially if you're breaking new ground, if there's environmental and historical preservation factors that might come into play, especially in waterways, things like that. But your project's, again, going to lay out the damages you incurred, and your scope of work's going to record how those damages are going to be repaired. And if you're going to go outside of that, let me know. Now, if you going to need a scope of work change, for instance, if there was a road that was washed out and you weren't previously able to get down that road, and now that you're repairing it, you're able to get down the road and you find additional damages, let me know. We could potentially get those included, but there might be some hidden damages that you weren't aware of beforehand. Now, if you had a culvert, for instance, and you want to instead put back a bridge, that's considered an improved project. It's keeping the same function of the facility, so the road would be passable before there was culverts, but you want to put back a bridge. You think that that would be the best thing to do, and so you're maintaining the same function of the facility of making a passable road, but you want to put it back bigger and better from a culvert to a bridge. Now, what FEMA will do is they will write a project to put back those culverts and the associated costs with those culverts, and they will cap that project at that amount, but then approve, hopefully, you putting back a bridge. So any additional expense beyond the initial cost of putting back the culverts would be your responsibility, but you would still receive funding towards restoring that facility back to its previous function. Now, if you had a facility that you don't want to repair, for instance, that same road, if you said, oh, that road got washed out, nobody uses that road anymore, we don't want to repair it, we're just going to let it go back to nature and let it go. FEMA will still write that project and the associated costs of repairing that road, but instead of repairing that road, you can do an alternate project and do something completely different with those funds that also say serves the same community. So you could put it towards a park, you can put it towards another one of your projects that's part of the disaster. So if there's a facility that was damaged and you don't want to restore that facility, you can do an alternate project and use those funds towards something else. But any questions about the scope of work changes, whether you're going to do the same scope, but just outside of the approved scope, if you want to do something bigger and better, or if you want to do something completely different. If you know that ahead of time, let your FEMA point of contact know. But if after the fact, after your project's written, you get around to actually repairing the facility and you want to do something different, let me know and we can submit a scope of work change and let FEMA review it and hopefully approve it and get those projects approved.
Eric, just so you know, there is a question in chat regarding a road, which, related to what you just talked about. It says, if the damages took place outside of the April 13/23 window, road failure a week later, for example, would these damages still be grant eligible? And I guess a caveat I'd like to add to that, what if the underlying route was caused by the storm, but let's say the actual maybe failure didn't happen or something until a little bit afterwards?
Yeah, so if the damages occurred as a result of the storm event from the storms from April 13th to 23rd, the damages have to have been caused by the storm event. So if the if the road was flooded and, a week later it collapses, then that could be considered a part of the damage event. And due to the damage or the storm event, and should be eligible.
Thanks. Michael, did that answer your question?
Yep, he's got it in there. All right. So also eligible are management costs. So there is any time that you spent for the PDA, gathering that documentation for the preliminary damage assessment, any of that time that you spent driving around, taking photos, gathering disaster damage information, coming up with costs, that time is eligible as management costs or administrative costs. It's not only you, but any staff that you had that incurred costs for that PDA. This time right now, you sitting here listening to me, this is eligible as management costs. Anytime that you sit down with FEMA at your recovery scoping meeting or in the future, that time is eligible for management costs. If you call me up and we go through whatever we're going through in relation to your projects, that time is eligible. Anytime that you spend, again, gathering documentation for closeout or your staff gathering cost information, all that time is eligible and can be included as administrative or management costs. Just keep track of the employee. You'll need to know, of course, their rate, but the date, how long they spent, and something, short description, like attended applicant briefing or attended recovery scoping meeting with FEMA or worked with WEM on submitting closeout documentation, something very brief, but any time that you or your staff spend with administrative management type costs that aren't necessarily directly associated with a particular project, all that time is eligible and can be reimbursable up to 5% of the overall cost of all your other projects. So all your A through G projects, the total cost of those, 5% of that you can get in management costs as well. So keep track of that time as it happens. It's a lot easier to, again, to record it as it happens than at the end of everything, trying to come up with those costs and gathering that documentation. But again, starting with the PDA all the way through closeout of your projects, any administrative time can be included in a CAT Z as it's called, management cost project. Your projects are going to fall into one of two types based on cost. There's a minimum project cost of $4,100 for this disaster event. That is a project cost, that is not damages costs. So if you had, for instance, 3 roads and damages were $1,500 on this road, $1,500 on this road, and $2,000 on the third road, those can all be combined into one project to meet that $4,100 threshold. So even though each individual road does not meet that threshold, they can all be combined into one project to meet the minimum project threshold. Projects are written by category. So again, A through G, and each project has to have $4,100 or more in costs in order to be eligible. So again, don't worry about eligibility right now. Bring all your costs, all your damages to your recovery scoping meeting, and FEMA will help you group those together into projects and make everything as much eligible as possible be included. But so you know, there is a $4,100 threshold per project, not per damage. So anything equal to or greater than $4,100 and less than $1,093,800 is considered a small project. For any work that's completed, FEMA is going to write that work completed based on the actual costs that you incurred. Anything that has not yet been completed will be written on cost estimates. Pros and cons with a small project: generally faster payments. You get your federal share up front, and any overrun that you get with a small project, you get to keep. So, for example, you can have a $1 million project. And after that project is approved and obligated, you sign a piece of paper and I will send you a check for $750,000 for zero work done. So you get that federal share right up front. Now, if you don't complete that work, you're going to have to pay that money back, but you do get the federal share up front with the remainder of the project paid out on the state share on project completion. But if you have that $1 million project and it only costs you $500,000 to complete that project, you get to keep that additional money. You do not have to pay it back or anything like that. As long as you complete the approved scope of work for that project, if it's a small project, you get the full project amount. Now, it is much easier to close these out. There's less documentation requirements. All I'm going to ask you for is pictures of the work completed and some documentation to show me that you incurred a cost, and then proof of payment that you paid those costs. Now, with small projects, it's harder to get any cost overruns recovered. It's not impossible. So if you have a $500,000 project and it costs you $800,000 to complete that project, it's harder to get that additional $300,000. It's, again, what we would have to do is submit a small project net cost overrun appeal to FEMA. And what that entails is taking all your small projects and doing a full audit down to the penny on all of them. So if you have 3 small projects, and we'll say project 1 is over by $10,000, and you want to try to recoup that additional $10,000, but on your second project you're under by $2,000, and on your third you're under by $8,000. So projects 2 and 3 are under by $10,000, but project 1 is over by $10,000. That's a net wash. You're not going to get any more money. But if project 1 is over by 20 and projects 2 and 3 are under by 10 combined, there's a net over by 10, which potentially could get reimbursed. So again, not impossible. It requires a little bit more work, and but point being, for any work that you haven't yet completed and you don't have actual costs for, when you are coming up with those cost estimates, make sure you have good estimates and take into account if you have a facility and it's going to take a year or 2, maybe 3 years. We have projects that go out 6, 7, 8 years. Costs go up, material costs go up, labor costs go up, costs go up. Take that into account. What I like to say is have generous but reasonable cost estimates. So when you are doing small projects, again, before you sign off on them, make sure that the costs are reasonable and takes into account any work that you have not yet completed. Any project that is written greater than or over $1,093,800 is considered a large project. Again, any work that you've already completed, FEMA is going to write that project on your actual costs that you've already incurred. And again, any work that you have not yet completed will be done on estimates. And FEMA can help you come up with estimates too if you don't have any of your own. But large projects have a much more detailed closeout, and these are closed out down to the penny. Large projects are reimbursed on actual costs incurred, and is much easier to recover any overruns. So if you have a $2 million project and it costs you $3 million to complete that project, as long as you followed the approved scope of work, project will be paid out based on that $3 million. So large projects are much easier to account for cost overruns, but they're paid out in actual. So again, if you had a $2 million project and it only cost you $1.5 million to complete it, it'll be paid out based on the $1.5 million. So whatever it costs, actual costs you incurred on a large project, that's what the final payment will be based on. Cost shares. General cost share, FEMA will pay no less than 75% of each project. And in the state of Wisconsin, we split the non-federal share. So 12.5% will be the state share and your share 12.5%. So 87.5% is usual reimbursement per project. And if you have donated resources, volunteer labor, anything like that, again, bring that with you. FEMA can write a project on it. And what that does is it shrinks the non-federal share on your emergency work projects. So your category A and B projects. So if you had a lot of volunteer turnout, a lot of donated resources, equipment, materials, whatever the case may be, that non-federal share could potentially shrink down to zero. But that's generally the cost share per project. So takeaways, again, can't stress enough, submit that request for public approval, a request for public assistance in grants portal by September 16th. Very, very important. Without that, you cannot participate in the PA program. Again, if you need help submitting that, getting set up in grants portal, whatever the case may be, please let me know. I can help you with that. And of course, document all your stuff. Are there any questions? Yep, the questions asked, will the meeting recording be made available to us? Yes, absolutely. The recording will be sent out and you can review it again later. And for those that weren't able to attend, they can watch it as well. That's me at the top. Again, I will be your state point of contact throughout this entire process. Best way to get a hold of me is by email. You can also, of course, give me a call. That's my desk number. If I'm in and out of the office, if I don't answer, leave me a message. I will return your call. But that's me. Questions, problems, issues of any sort, any assistance that I can provide you from now through project closeout, I'm here to assist you in any way that I can. If you don't like me, that's my boss underneath me. You can give him a call. Also, there's a general email box. I used to have a bunch of staff, a bunch of people used to monitor that email box. It's just me now. You'll get me either way, but both email addresses are out there. But generally, my email up top is the best way to get a hold of me, and of course our website. Are there any other questions I can help? I know I went through a lot, but if not, thank you very much for your time today. And again, if you need any assistance, let me know. Otherwise, thank you, and you are free to drop.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, for doing this for everyone.